In today's tutorial, you will see me create 4 different art journal pages. And along the way, I'm going to give you 5 reasons or benefits to working small. I'm going to be working in this repurposed book that I've turned into an art journal. The open pages measure about 5 by 3.5. I'll put a link to the video where I turn this book into an art journal in case you want to go check it out. Number 1 reason to work small, it lets you use those little bits of leftover. In the top right-hand corner, I've got 2 little dabs of paint. There's not enough there for my regular size art journal pages, but there is enough to be used on these small surfaces. Here I'm just smooshing on paint by after watering it down a little bit. If you don't have a book like this, don't worry. Cut some ATCs, that's 3.5 by 2.5. Get some index cards and gesso them over, and then use them in the way you see me creating small in this video. So once I smoosh it on, I'm drying it, then I'm adding the next color. If you want them to blend, you can smoosh wet on wet. If you want it to keep their colors and not blend, then you want to dry in between. Smooshing is a very quick way of getting paint on the page, especially after you've done a creative session, and this is really part of the cleanup. I don't want to spend a lot of time with something else. I'm usually ready to go and do other parts of my life. So here I'm just giving it a quick dry. Now this is being done several days before I'm actually going to finish this art journal page. So you can build it up over time, adding as you go, which is going to, well, it breaks the page and it shortens the time that you will have to create when you actually go to finish the page. Here I'm adding some little bits of thick gesso. I was using this stencil on another project. It's already dirty. So I just decided I'm just going to add it to this. I grabbed the book that's right in front of me and I'm just adding a little bit of thin texture to it. So use up those little bits and have a place for them to go. You may want to check out my accidental art journal. It uses the unwanted and leftover materials as well. I'll put a link to that video. So number 2 reason, working small lets you use those small scale ephemeras that you have. Now I don't know about you, but I have tons of this. I've got napkins like this that have beautiful images, but they're on the small scale, so they're not going to work on my larger journal pages. If you have small stamps, again, this is the perfect place for them. You can use the focal images. A lot of the die cuts and things that you get from Tim Holtz and various places, all very small scale. And I collect them, but I struggle with actually using them. Here I've took off the excess plies of the napkin, and I'm gluing it onto a piece of copy paper. This is from the recycle bin. I'm gluing it down because the background already has color and I don't want that color to come through the very translucent napkin. And as with usual, I cut out more than I know I'm going to use. Gives me options and then put stuff in my stash. I'm using a script stamp here and adding some black to the background and a little fine detail. And then I'm shading around it. That black shading around it just frames the page. Now I'm just playing with the composition. Where do I want it? I grabbed a sentiment from my Through the Garden Gate sentiment pack and I'm cutting it to size. Remember, when you buy any of my sentiment packs from Ninny's Napkins, you can size them. You can make them larger if you want, or you can make them smaller. Perfect for these small makes. There you can see all the little napkins that I glued down. Now this page was actually done in 3 different steps. I smooshed in one day, another day I added the modeling or the gesso through the stencil, and then today I grabbed it and I'm finishing it up. I found this little black seed pods in my stash, and it just was the perfect accompaniment. Goes so well with the black of the text of the sentiment and the shading that I did. Again, using up all that small ephemera. I'm gluing everything down with either gel matte medium or fluid matte medium. If it's thicker, I use gel. If it's thin, I go with fluid. But you can make either or work. And there I realized that I had put the page upside down. Oh well, I do love the page regardless of it being upside down. Here I'm just adding some shading with some black acrylic paint in my angle brush. And then I'm just deepening the color with a wash of color from my Inktense blocks. And adding a few highlights with white paint on my angle brush. And shading around the sentiment. I would never have chosen to use the magenta and the yellow green together on a page, but I absolutely love it. That's another bonus reason for working small. You're more likely to take chances and make some good discoveries. I love how this page turned out. Now the second one, I've smooshed on here. I actually ended up spilling some of my Lindy's Starburst spray. Another reason to work small is it's quick. You don't have to give a lot of time to it. So if you're pressed for time, you can do a page or several pages if you've already added paint and had some of that background color like I did in the first one. So you don't need 2 hours to get in there. You can get in there and get a lot accomplished and feel good about yourself. There's nothing more disheartening than having a project last too long. Now, because this is Lindy's Starburst spray and that is not permanent, I'm using my distress crayons to shade around the outside. I don't want to put any wet medium. I look in my stash and I find this small clock. These butterflies are from a napkin that I harvested in the same way that I took the flower in the first one. I'm adding a few small scale stamps just to add a little pattern and interest to my background. And now I'm really ready to assemble. Both this page and the last page, the smooshing background was already done by adding those little bits of leftovers or spilled ink, as the case was with this one. I chose the blue butterflies because there's a blue tinge with that purple in the background. I don't have to restart thinking about it. The color has been set because I've put the colors on the page. I'm just working with it. One less decision to make. Just outlining the sentiment with my pit pen. And another beautiful page. Now with this, I am going a little bit vintage. So I'm using unbleached titanium and I'm starting right from scratch. This page, I wanted to do 3 on this for this video and I didn't have another one started. So I'm mixing unbleached titanium and white gesso on a background. And it kind of gives a mottled effect when I blend it wet on wet. And I'm using this stencil kind of all over to keep that vintage feel. So another reason to work small, less is more. Because you're working on a smaller space, you can do less, and that's okay. So you can focus on 1 or 2 techniques and 1 or 2 colors. And if you're a beginner, that will really help give you success. If you're not a beginner, like me, but lately I've been really in my head and overthinking everything, I needed the simplicity of these small pages to get me out of my head. I watercut the napkin after removing the plies and I'm just gluing it on to the background. And for the most part, this page is done. Less is more. I'm adding a little bit of script stamp. That always goes good on vintage. Here I'm using sepia archival ink. Then I'm shading with my charcoal pencil. So as I said, if you don't have a book like this, don't worry. Cut some cardboard, cardstock, mixed media paper to an ATC size, that's 2.5 by 3.5 inches, or 4 by 6 or 5 by 7, gesso them and have them there. I'm adding another small stamp just to kind of grunge it up a little bit. And then I'm using my letter stamps to stamp the word grow. And I'm dipping it into black acrylic paint. And there I had a little bit of a mess, so tidying up. Working small allows you to just be creative, to experiment, to just enjoy the process. It really isn't about making great art, although sometimes you come up with a combination that you're going to love and then you can take that information and knowledge and do it on a larger scale. Here I mix up some magenta with some Naples yellow and just splattered it. As you can see, I stamped the word grow a couple times. Now, of course, I have leftover paint. So I'm turning the page and I'm going to use that leftover paint for yet another art journal. So these pages also use minimal supplies. You're not taking out everything, which means you're not cleaning up everything. And if you're a beginner, you don't have everything yet. So, 2 to 3 colors. 1 stamp, 1 stencil. As I said earlier, less is more. Here I'm brayering on the paint, which is another quick way to get that paint onto a background. So the background done, I grabbed this Playful Plumes stencil from the Crafter's Workshop and grabbed the magenta paint, and I am just stenciling this pattern onto the background. That's all I'm going to do for the background. So I have 2 colors and white gesso and a stencil. How simple. And I'm loving this. This was the first time I've actually used this stencil. Won't be the last time. It gives a lot of movement to the background. I'm shading around with the magenta. I do shade later with black, and that really sets off the page. I grab in my stash, I have the Julie Nutting dolls, and I picked this one because I like the dark hair against that background. And I chose to paint her dress kind of a turquoisey color, because turquoise is across from that yellow peachy coral color that is in the background. And if they're across from each other on the color wheel, they're going to work well on a page together. And I'm only using part of the Julie Nutting doll. Once that's done, I'm just gluing everything down. Now, all 4 of these pages took under an hour and a half to be done. That's 4 pages. So you can see how quick and easy it was. And it did. As I kept going, as I doing it, I was more and more out of my head. I wasn't overthinking it. I was enjoying the creative process. And what's been causing me problems lately kind of disappeared. So I hope I've convinced you to think about working small. I have pictures of the finished projects at the end. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, ask me a question. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, click on the bell, and ask to be notified of upcoming videos. That way you won't miss any. Until next time, go get creative. So of course I had leftover paint, so I grabbed some of that turquoise paint, grabbed a stencil that was nearby, and I'm just stenciling it on. Grab some green yellow and put that on, and now we have the beginnings of yet another page. Bye for now.